107.5 The Game Podcasting is sponsored by Modern Exterminating, a family-oriented company. Professional, honest, and dependable pest control solutions. We're your one-stop shop for all pests. We do it all. We know what bugs you. Visit us online at pestfreesc.com. That's pestfreesc.com.
11 o'clock Monday morning. Welcome in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris along with you, rolling along through last couple days of April and concluding spring football. Friday night spring game over at Williams-Brice Stadium. Guy, I know you guys were obviously on the call up there in the press box, but as somebody that was out in the general masses in regular seating, I think we got a bigger than expected turnout, to say the least. That was a pretty solid crowd there on Friday night.
Yeah, you know, we were on the side that had the lower and upper bowls open. Yeah. And so we kind of had to, you know, you kind of had to turn and look up, try to look up, try to look down. But that side looked pretty full.
Yep.
That's what I was curious about, you know, with it being Friday night, you had Easter weekend, you had the Heritage, all the things that Shane Beamer talked about when the date was originally set. But people seemed to like it, right? I mean, you had Friday night game. The fact that it wasn't televised, you know, probably helped. Hopefully, I did hear it was funny. I know Wes and I both heard from a lot of people that listened to the broadcast because they weren't able to watch the game. So I think that, you know, even more people were driven to radio, which is awesome, of course.
Yep.
Love listening to it on the radio. And, yeah, really good crowd out there. And the fireworks show afterwards. Saw a lot of families out there. It seemed like everybody had a great time.
I could tell when I was walking in before the game, and it was like, I don't know, an hour and a half, 2 hours until, you know, kickoff, I guess you would say. And there was already people just tailgating and hanging out. And it obviously was not quite a real game atmosphere, but it was not sort of just, well, hey, people don't care about this. Like, it was pretty obvious already. Like, there were people out there for the Gamecock Walk. There were people actually already lining up to go in the game relatively early, I thought. And, you know, I don't want to speak on this definitively, but I think they maybe ended up having to open more of the stadium than they even anticipated. I heard some people kind of trying to get into different areas and not being able to, and then I think they ultimately were able to. So I think it maybe almost was a little bit surprising how big the crowd was. And like y'all said, that the west side lower looked completely filled. I mean, that was fantastic. And I know that Shane Beamer, I'm sure, was happy with it because that was part of the reason he still wanted to have a spring game was, hey, let's get these young guys out there in front of a crowd. Let's put some pressure on the kickers and kind of the special teams and all that stuff. That was something we talked about before the game was, do we see them get a little bit creative with how they put the kickers and punters and all the other specialists in some different situations, and they were able to do that. So, you know, guys, I thought all things considered, it was a pretty successful Friday night, I think.
Yeah, look, again, take it from somebody that was actually, you know, in the stands with the regular crowd. It took me until about halfway through the first quarter to finally actually find a seat because every section you went to, oh, this is full, and you had to keep climbing up or go down until I finally settled into where I was there in one of the end zones. So good crowd. Obviously, like you said, Chris, you didn't get to see it on TV, so if you want to put your eyes on it, you had to be there in person, and everybody seemed engaged and interactive with what was happening there. Beamer obviously firing the crowd up at some points, and at the end of the day, we get a low-scoring defensive skirmish, I think, as we expected. Garnet coming out on top 10-7. And again, you read everything with a little bit of a grain of salt because you had mixed teams with the draft and stuff like that. But a lot of players were able to stand out over the course of the game on Friday night. And we'll just kind of start at the top here with quarterbacks because Lenore Sellers, we didn't need to see anything out of him. We know what we have there. But this backup quarterback battle is so interesting. And I think maybe the biggest surprise for everyone was the amount of time that Luke Doty got playing for the Garnet team. I mean, he basically ran that offense pretty much the entire game, save for a little bit at the end when Dante Reno came in because Black had loaded up with Sellers and Air Nolan and Cutter Woods on the other side.
Well, I mean, yeah, that was certainly the draft strategy for Black. And so when you saw Garnet and you saw Doty, again, I'll go back to a point that we've been making, and we made it on the broadcast too. too many people are, I think, discounting Luke Doty in this race. He wasn't just a token inclusion, you know. And if you look, I thought about this too. It's not the same situation, but remember when it's not even close to the same situation. But remember when Zeb Nolan was pulled from a grad assistant who seemed done with college football, and then he's on the roster, and you go, oh, okay, cool depth thing, and maybe it kind of started that way, and then lo and behold, he's in there playing and starting. You know, I think some people are not quite in the same way, but oh, cool, Luke Doty's back in the quarterback room. He's, maybe he's just there to be a leader. And look, he is being those things. Aaron Nolan talked to me about that during one of our interviews here on the program. But Luke Doty is a factor in this backup race, which has very much been an open question. I think probably is still an open question after the spring, summer, preseason. Beamer has said this publicly, and I think privately everything that we've heard kind of matches that. But, Beamer said after the game, look, Luke has had a really good spring at quarterback. And, Wes, you always point out Luke Doty has played. He has started. He's thrown for 1,500 yards as a South Carolina quarterback. Yes, in a different systems, plural, but a valuable member of this team. And when you look across the roster, South Carolina does not have anyone besides Luke Doty who fits that mold of being an experienced player who's done a variety of roles for you. He's come off the bench. He's been on the bench. He's been a starter. He's come on in relief. Like, he has that full gamut, kind of like Robbie Ashford had last year. When you look at the rest of the roster, is there some talent? Yes. But it's not anybody who has played meaningful snaps or snaps at all in a college football game. So, yes, Doty has that experience, but he also has some very meaningful experience, and the staff feels like you get kind of the sense that they would trust him if the season started today. It doesn't, so we'll see what happens there, but you can't discount him in this thing.
Yeah, I think, guys, whenever there's a position battle, sometimes you exit, whether we're talking about spring or even preseason ball, you exit that with maybe a much better idea of where a position group is headed. I maybe exit spring more questions than ever, and I don't mean questions just in terms of like it's a question mark, like, hey, they're not going to be able to find a backup quarterback, but just questions in terms of who has the best chance to be that guy. Like, I think you can make potentially arguments for three different guys at this point, and I think it's going to continue certainly into the summer and maybe deep into the preseason at some point in terms of just splitting the reps. You really want to know who that QB2 is, but as of right now, luckily you don't have to make that decision. So I think that is quite a luxury, though, to have a guy like Doty to turn to at that position. And we'll see if he ends up being the best option or not. But, I thought he actually made some really good throws that are maybe being overshadowed a little bit. We got to get to Cutter Woods here in a second. Cutter, for a guy just in that his first opportunity like that, I thought was phenomenal. But Luke had, and I guess we need to describe things a little bit for people who were not there. Normally we're just referencing things people have already seen. But one thing people did saw, if you looked on social media, was the touchdown throw to Malik Clark at the pylon. And it was a great kind of back shoulder throw, put the ball where your guy can go get it. And then it was a really phenomenal catch by Malik as well to contort his body, catch the football, and get his feet down. There's another throw that didn't really make the highlights from Luke where he rolled to his right a little bit and threw a nice corner route to Maurice Brown on the sideline, who caught the ball for a first down on that same touchdown drive. So I want to get to Cutter here in a second, but Chris, I thought, and Tyler, you were there too, man, I thought that Luke just kind of quietly had a solid day, made some pretty good decisions. He had one long run on a third down that he extended, and just played the role of veteran where if you were a backup going in a game, they would be saying, hey, hit the balls that are there, but don't put us in bad situations.
Yeah, and like Chris said, if you're into a situation early on in the season where hope it doesn't happen, but Lenore Sellers got hurt, you probably feel most comfortable with turning it over to him, at least until you saw more development and got those guys behind him to the point where maybe they could take over for a longer period of time. Again, we're having this conversation hoping we don't have to run into this situation because Sellers is healthy the entire season, but something you obviously have to consider. And yeah, I guess we now shift Luke Doty's little number thing back to the quarterback room as opposed to the wide receiver room, or split it in half between what he had been doing. And yeah, again, you have to tip your cap to a guy that has been willing to do anything and everything that's been asked of him here at South Carolina. In today's world of college football, as soon as guys get, bumped down the depth chart or get replaced by somebody, they're hitting the portal and going finding their playing time somewhere else. But this guy, as he's talked about many times, loves Carolina, loves Columbia, wants to do anything he can to help out the team. And whether that be play receiver, quarterback, or do some stuff on special teams, he's literally done it all up to this point. And, he'll be loved around here locally forever because of that.
Yeah, and it's a rare find nowadays. And that's not even making a positive, negative statement. It's just like an objective fact. You're not going to find very often a guy who is a fourth, fifth, sixth-year player like Luke is. Beamer was like, what is he, on 7? I guess he was joking. He literally might not have known. It's hard to find that type of guy, especially at quarterback, which is a position where – you see more transfers. There's one ball. Quarterbacks generally want to play quarterback, but he has stuck it out. He loves being a Gamecock, and he's going to be a really valuable member of this team this year. No matter what shape that takes, it might take the form of him being a backup quarterback and never really playing. He may have to do what Robbie Ashford did at times last year. Maybe he doesn't win the backup job, but either way, he's going to be a super valuable member. Now, that takes us to Cutter.
Yes. Do you want to save this for the other side?
Should we table that for the other side? Yeah, it's probably a longer discussion.
We'll start off with what Beamer had to say and go from there, because Cutter Woods did turn a lot of heads on Friday night at South Carolina spring game. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris on your Monday here on The Game.